The faintest pulse from a street lamp in Reykjavik, the neon gloss of Shibuya-ku at midnight, the silent radar pulses sweeping above Antarctic ice. Every diode, filament, laser and sensor that defines Earth's electric heartbeat vanishes at the same breathless instant. It is 4:17 universal time coordinated when the last measurable what tumbles to zero, not a brownout, not rolling black grids, but a perfect planetary null. No auroral flicker crowns the magnetosphere, no overloaded substation groans into flame. It is an almost arrogant stillness, as if an unseen hand has pinched closed the universe's own circuit breaker. In bedrooms and control towers, on research vessels and orbital stations, eyes bloom open to a darkness so total that it becomes the only fact left. For most, the first instinct is simple math. The electricity must return in seconds because it has never stayed gone. Yet the seconds refuse to shrink into reason. Phones die mid-scroll, high-rise windows lose their phosphor glow, and a creeping primitive hush begins replacing society's familiar electrical hiss. What could possibly do this? In the quiet, speculation breeds with morbid speed. Many lean on the dread that has stalked engineers for decades, a solar superstorm, a Carrington event on steroids. 17 hours earlier, radio telescopes indeed caught a coronal mass ejection so vast its CME shock front punched a crescent into Mercury's exosphere. The sun had seemed to shrug and terawatts of magnetized plasma hurled toward Earth. Normally such a storm would shear off transformers, not the planetary core of generation, but astrophysicists note an anomaly embedded in the plasma was an ultra-low-frequency wave train that theory said could, in principle, resonate with Earth's ionospheric cavity like a tuning fork. Under that hammerstroke, the planet's natural Schumann resonances might spike, shorting grids simultaneously instead of regionally. Others grasp at cosmic nightmares stranger still. Somewhere in the Oort cloud, a hypervelocity microblack hole, a gravitational marble the mass of Manhattan yet no wider than a proton, could have whistled through our mantle, shearing magnetic field lines and ringing the core like an iron bell. Its passing marked only by the sudden collapse of every power line's induced current. Or perhaps the cause is nearer, a coordinated cyber-physical attack, a million-node malware lattice laid dormant inside firmware for a decade, detonated by a single radio whisper. Still more poetic theorists invoke a brush with a rogue plasma filament from the Sagittarius arm, one that momentarily quenched the sun's output at Earth's orbital longitude, a fleeting eclipse no telescope detected because photons and data died together. Whatever the root, humanity's technological skin is now just elaborate sculpture. Within the first 60 seconds, every base-load turbine, nuclear, geothermal, hydro, coal, has tripped its emergency scram or equivalent. Spinning reserve winds down in the dark like orphaned music boxes. Natural gas combined cycle plants shrivel beneath automatic shutdowns. Regional black start dies because no battery banks stand ready, their inverters as helpless as the bulbs they once fed. Across Africa's Sahel, microgrids that once boasted solar autonomy discover autonomy means little when charge controllers lose both reference voltage and firmware integrity. Even fusion prototypes, cocooned in superconducting magnets, suffer rapid quench because cryocoolers fail, flash boiling liquid helium into roaring clouds that freeze the last indicator, LEDs mid-blink. Yet the strangeness of total power loss is felt most viscerally in places confidence once reigned. Commercial jets, mid-trans-Pacific, glide suddenly on ghostly instrument panels. Turbine ignition requires electric spark. Hydraulic pumps insist on electrons, cabin lights dim to the ember-red glow of backup chemsticks. Pilots wrestle with the unthinkable calculus of range to water, they trade altitude for time, calculate manual restarts that will never occur, and broadcast distress calls nobody hears because satellites, too, have blinked to black. On the International Space Station, the station's photovoltaic arrays still bathe in sun, but internal power buses report nonsensical zeros as though an electromagnetic veil has smothered the very notion of potential difference. Astronauts page through bound emergency checklists by head torch, discovering that every line presumes the existence of power on the other side of a breaker that now feels ornamental. Minute 3, the planet listens to itself. No subwoofer, urban rumble, no distant siren Doppler, not even the saturated ambience of fridge compressors. Deserts thrum with wind alone, oceans with surf, forests with the tiny hydraulic pops of transpiring trees. Cities are suddenly acoustic amphitheaters of human confusion. Window frames slam as residents pry them open for summer air now absent from thermostats. Dog barks travel kilometers. In Sao Paulo, surgeons find their theaters drowned in oily moonlight from skylights. They stitch by hand lantern while anesthesiologists count pulse beats with fingertips. In Chicago, maglev commuters are entombed beneath the river until maintenance staff fetch hand cranks to unlatch doors, one carriage at a time, into tunnel gloom scented with brake dust. Across Greenland, ice core scientists realize their rapidly warming sample caches will deliquesce into scientific oblivion within hours unless they improvise wind-catch refrigeration. Wind that must be harnessed by blades carved with hand saws from helicopter crates. By hour 1, the most fragile layer of civilization, digital memory, begins to reveal its terror. A global diaspora of data centers, once touted as redundant clouds guarding culture's cumulative thought, confronts the cruel arithmetic of thermal runaway. Without chilled glycol loops, server halls climb past 50 degrees Celsius, error-correcting codes flag bit rot at logarithmic speed. Engineers scramble to bleed heat by flinging open loading bays, stacking portable CO2 extinguishers as crude cryogenics, or, in a move that will later become legend, burying entire blade enclosures in slush commandeered from ice rinks. Governments debate dispatching armed convoys to nuclear plants, not to generate, but to contain, decay heat in PWR fuel rods still demands submersive cooling. Diesel for emergency generators exists, yet fuel pumps require electricity to retrieve it. Some bright idealists propose bucket brigades of petrol, capturing for a moment the archaic heroism of bucket chains fighting village fires, only now the village is a reactor core the size of a stadium. At 6 hours, the near-lightless Earth begins to distort human circadian rhythms. The optic nerve longs for 470 nanometers sky scatter to regulate melatonin. Instead, candlelit living rooms produce spectral hues that trick bodies into perpetual dusk. Mothers soothe infants who sense something colossal has shifted. Radio astronomers, now ironically blessed with radio silence, haul analog notebooks outdoors and sketch cosmic maps beneath riotous star capes normally bleached by sodium lamps. They note with panic that the northern lights, once forecast to blaze from the CME, are timid. Perhaps the magnetosphere itself is compromised and cannot channel charged particles. If true, the planet is a shieldless ship in cosmic weather. The cascade of interconnected consequences accelerates. Water treatment plants cease chlorination. By the 12th hour, pathogens begin breeding in municipal reservoirs. Skyscraper sump pumps fail, and sewer gases creep upward. In Mumbai, a monsoon squall engorges drainage canals. Without electronically controlled sluice gates, floodwater tests the load-bearing honesty of colonial sea walls. Stock exchanges sit as dark cathedrals of Anout monitors while paper ledgers suddenly surge in value. Gold vaults, their combination locks frozen, are valued mostly as doorstop mass. Agriculture feels the bite next. Dairy farms, unable to chill milk, commence frantic cheese-making under lantern light, a medieval patch on modern supply chains. Automated vertical farms watch sensors blink but cannot hydrate crops. Vines wilt against LED arrays that are now mere mirrors reflecting human worry. Gene banks in Svalbard, ironically the doomsday backup of biodiversity, find themselves warmed by unchecked ventilation fans that fail, pivot dampers and jam in open position, letting Atlantic humidity invade glacial vaults. Curators shovel snow inside to insulate seeds in ad hoc permafrost mounds. Governments, some groping for legitimacy, declare martial protocols at megaphoned intersections. Powerless traffic signals mean intersections are calculus lethal to the impatient. In Washington, D.C., continuity of government bunkers discover their EMP-hardened diesel generators depend on motorized vent louvers that stuck mid-cycle, suffocating engines in their own exhaust. Parliamentarians worldwide revert to candle sessions, drafting edicts that will never reach provinces because printing presses rely on vacuums pulled by electronic pumps to set ink. Still, the human mind is restless. It calculates outcomes beyond present panic. Two great branches of possibility crystallize around a single dread. Are the world's electrons merely dormant, or have their coded memories vanished? Branch 1. Data intact. If the blackout is purely energetic, then every photomask, etched memory cell, every spinning platter, every cloud instance holds its bits in perfect slumber, awaiting nothing more mysterious than voltage to awaken them. Civilization, though bruised, can in theory reboot like a hibernating animal. The immediate goal is survival through the dark interval, keeping hospitals oxygenated, city dwellers hydrated, and reactor cores cooled, after which grid synchronization might occur in a colossal ballet involving black star diesel lines, synchronous condensers, and the careful phasing of continental interties. In this branch, the crisis is logistics and morale. Can we keep flesh alive long enough to meet the sunrise of electrons? Branch 2. Data lost. The more apocalyptic fork assumes that whatever silenced electricity also injected destructive transients deep into semiconductor junctions, frying CMOS gates and flipping magnetic domains into white noise. Under this doom, hard drives spin freely but read as gibberish, SSDs become blank quartz, satellite firmware corrupts mid-orbit. Here the blackout is not a pause but a cosmic format. The Earth that re-emerges when power returns will find its cultural memory erased as surely as Alexandria's scrolls turn to ash. No GPS ephemerides, no digital medical charts, no climate models or blockchain ledgers. Societies would stumble into a second renaissance, equal parts wonder and terror, as mechanical presses, analog film, and vinyl archives become priceless again. Even before choosing which branch is destiny, the range of equipment failures begins to sort itself into inevitable versus possible. Some systems are doomed by basic physics. Transformer windings designed for oscillating 50/60ths Hz flux supersaturate under DC-like geomagnetic bias, overheat, and melt their cellulose insulation. That verdict is universal. Lithium-ion batteries used in everything from e-bikes to grid storage will vent or thermal runaway within 12 hours if BMS logic circuits cannot modulate charge. Fires bloom silently in warehouses from Shenzhen to Rotterdam. Cryogenic superconducting magnets in MRI suites quench and send fountains of nitrogen fog through rupture disks. The machines survive, but only as large copper weights. Fiber optic backbones remain physically intact, yet erbium-doped repeaters spaced every 80 kilometers are deadweight. Here damage is merely possible, not guaranteed, dependent on whether transient currents arced across low-voltage control boards. Aviation avionics range from completely fried, fly-by-wire systems hit by transient surges to merely asleep. Analog gyros in a handful of antique aircraft stand ready, a niche salvation. Nuclear reactors, pressurized water designs face inevitable decay heat issues. Molten salt prototypes might coast thanks to freeze plug safety, leaving them merely at risk, not certain doom. Agricultural pivots and drones are split. Those with surge protection in their motor drivers might revive, but most exposed MOSFET gates are toast. These early taxonomies form around campfires and emergency command posts. Humanity, staring toward a horizon rinsed of artificial light, realizes it must husband knowledge more critically than fuel. Everywhere, notebooks proliferate. Engineers scribble wiring diagrams by memory, botanists trace seed vault maps, coders transcribe key algorithms in pencil, their pages more valuable than cash. Yet beneath the anxiety, an unexpected richness surfaces. Night skies reveal the Milky Way's dust lanes to billions for the first time. Acoustic ecologists note how whales, unjostled by sonar and shipping propellers, sing new, elaborate arias that carry across ocean basins. Humans, once sealed behind double-glazed urban hush, rediscover the cadence of real silence and the sweet terror it brings. They are animals in a cosmos not built for convenience. The first day closes, if day can be spoken of at all, with a psychological inversion older than civilization. Humanity measures safety not by what it can see, but by what it can hear: footsteps, distant voices, heartbeats in nearby tents. Some neighborhoods form literal circles of residency around central bonfires, a layout unseen since Bronze Age hill forts, because open flames mean both heat and mutual surveillance. Sleep is uneven. Hearts thud faster under starlight, cortisol surges with each dog howl. But the longer eyes remain dark adapted, the more constellations pour stories into minds starved of screens. Elder astronomers recall myths aloud, and children, scandalized to learn these patterns predate electricity by millennia, realize perhaps 3 days without light is not an apocalypse but a deferred appointment with our species' original night. At dawn, though dawn is a rumor behind dull overcast, for morning clouds have reclaimed sky now unlit by city halos, new calculus begins, fuel inventories, marrow-deep ethics about triage, and the haunting probability that entire continents may never power up again. The 72nd hour without electricity dawns as an uneasy twilight of semi-adaptation. The planet's surface, viewed from space, is now a mottled sphere of candle halos clustered around river deltas and inland trade routes. Each white-orange ember, a city shrinking back toward its medieval footprint. From orbit, the Terminator line looks bruised, smeared. Without synthetic light, the contrast between night and day softens into primal gradients. Yet below, the world's metabolic panic is sharpening, because human systems tolerate darkness far better than they tolerate immobility. 0-1 The physics of pause. Inside decommissioned turbines, Rotors that once spun at 3,000 RPM have cooled and warped minutely, changing perfectly balanced giants into asymmetric sculptures. Steel remembers heat. Alloys drift from tolerance. Without the gentle counter-music of lubricants circulated by electric pumps, microscopic pitting blossoms along shaft journals. Engineers, lanterns strapped to hard hats, document this quiet sabotage of time, penciling equations on rusting control panels. If rotation does not resume within 36H, total rebuild required. The phrase becomes an industrial mantra whispered from Brazil's Itaipu Dam to the Cascades of the Three Gorges. The longer the blackout stretches, the rarer the hope that grids can cold start at all. Baseload plants depend on diesel-powered auxiliary boilers to prime their steam cycles, but diesel stocks are hostage to electrically driven pipeline compressors. Railways, choked by silent signal systems, cannot deliver coal. Nuclear staff discover a bitter irony. Their plants could in principle self-power from residual reactor heat, yet every safety law forbids breaching containment interlocks without redundant electronic verification. Regulations once written to prevent catastrophe now prevent salvation. 0-2 second-order extinctions. Ecology begins its own reckoning. Without electric fencing, African wildlife reserves experience ghost migrations. Elephants amble through ragged fence stumps into farmland where unshielded granaries stand tantalizingly full. Farmers, shotgun poor because modern poaching defenses once relied on drone surveillance, wrestle with prehistoric dilemmas in real time. On other continents, temperature-controlled hatcheries fail. Billions of salmon fry perish in unoxygenated dark, erasing seasons of coastal economies. Bee colonies in Scandinavian greenhouses, deprived of supplemental UV, cluster lethargically and lose orientation. The summer pollination window shrinks to a third, jeopardizing seed set for next year's food. Oceanographers aboard a powerless research vessel drift across the North Pacific subtropical gyre, documenting how plankton fluorescence has brightened by 4% now that shipping lanes fall silent and skies dim. Yet the same scientists watch curiously lethal calm envelop coastal dead zones. Municipal outflows rich with nutrients still pour untreated into rivers. Gravity is relentless even when pumps are not. But aerators that once oxygenated estuaries are mute. Fish climb near the surface, rake gills in hypoxic water, and die in glittering slicks that reflect the last hints of dawn light. 0-3 polities in mutation. With data cables dead, statecraft returns to a velocity measured in hoofbeats and semaphore flags. Autonomous communities emerge not from ideology but from practical line of sight. A ring of mountain towns in the Alps forges a copper league, melting household wiring into telegraph coils. They resurrect 19th century relay stations on snowy peaks and invent a crude Morse for necessities: milk, salt, doctor, iron. Meanwhile, sprawling metropolises fracture into warring municipal boroughs whose boundaries are defined by walkable distance and potable wells. In Los Angeles, the San Fernando Valley barricades Ventura Boulevard and prints wooden script redeemable for grain. Downtown replies by controlling rainfall catch basins in the aqueduct grid, trading water for fresh produce trucked on biodiesel rigs still functional under jury-rigged mechanical governors. Border control evolves into border consensus. Satellites offer no reconnaissance, so nations grant each other observer rights. Diplomatic riders can cross demarcation lines to attest there is no clandestine troop buildup. An echo of medieval hostage customs, only now with laptops replaced by spiral notebooks. Yet trust erodes hourly. Rumors of secret reactor meltdowns in Siberia spread westward faster than truth can travel, prompting Scandinavian governments to evacuate coastal perimeters on what might be a false windrose. In the vacuum of information, panic learns to reproduce. 0-4 the bifurcation becomes fate. By the end of day 2, the world's engineering core accepts that the fork between data intact and data lost must be empirically decided. They design a universal litmus test. Salvage a buried vault of first-generation EEPROM chips from the 1980s, devices robust against charge leakage, and read their contents with a hand-crank generator powering an oscilloscope. Across 5 continents, teams replicate the experiment, swapping part numbers via bicycle couriers. Results converge. 37% of samples preserve their code, 63% do not. The pattern is suspiciously non-random. correlating with geomagnetic latitude and altitude like fingerprints of an extraterrestrial EMP. Inference hardens into consensus. Magnetic domains on spinning rust platters survived if they were parked, flash transistors died almost universally, and DRAM lost its mind in microseconds. Humanity's memory is now a patchwork. Analog film archives in climate-controlled vaults are fine. Text stored in redundant SSD arrays is gone, and anything resident in active RAM at the moment of blackout evaporated. The species finds itself literate in hieroglyph halves, a Gutenberg Bible here, a broken SHA 256 there. Universities draft staves of scholars into brigades named curators, charged with traveling on horseback to map surviving knowledge caches before mildew or mobs claim them. 05 machinery of flesh. In hospitals, biomed techs perform statistical triage on organ support devices. Dialysis requires rotary pumps, beyond muscle endurance, but insulin infusion can be mimicked by capillary drip rigs. Thus, diabetic children gain a fighting chance while kidney patients fade. Labor wards pivot to practices last standard in 1920. Midwives rely on breech birth maneuvers authored by names long forgotten in digital textbooks. Neonates that would once incubate in gentle thermoregulation are instead swaddled against parents' torsos, skin to skin, a method now called kangaroo care and taught across refugee shelters. Medicines stratify into chemical nobility and peasant classes. Molecules stable at room temperature, aspirin, doxycycline, remain democratic. Biologics like monoclonal antibodies perish in warm fridges, transforming entire therapeutic eras into nostalgia. Immunologists, confronted by the sudden poverty of biotech, raid equine farms to resurrect serum therapies. Horses are immunized against diphtheria and venom again, their plasma harvested through gravity taps. Prehistoric biotech reinvigorated by blackout. 06 currency, code, and crime. Without electronic ledgers, currencies reboot into metallurgical truths. Copper coins once shrugged at in couch cushions assume exchange primacy because copper smelts at backyard temperatures and wires easily. Silver is hoarded for its antimicrobial edge. Gold, too inert to do work, is regarded with suspicion by pragmatists despite its ancient glamour. Crime syndicates pivot fast. Former ransomware gangs rebrand as analog forgers, etching microintaglio designs onto wooden printing plates to counterfeit new script. Law enforcement, outgunned on detail craftsmanship, turns to biometrics of the human face, sketched on paper by artists trained in the blackout to prosecute identity fraud. Yet a minority of crypto savants bets on eventual grid resurrection. They guard titanium seed phrase plates stored under river stones, believing that if electricity ever returns, the blockchain will be the only incorruptible chronicle. These node monks establish silent monasteries in decommissioned hydropower tunnels, using hand turbines spun by waterfalls to keep a single laptop alive once per week, long enough to verify whether the global hash rate stirs. Each failed boot sequence weighs on their faith like a theological doubt. 07 climate without consoles. Meteorology reverts to empirical theater. Weather forecasters climb bell towers to watch cloud stacks, measure barometric pressure with mercury columns, and scratch synoptic charts on slate. The first unpredicted hurricane makes landfall in the Gulf of Mexico on blackout day 49, ripping through communities already fragile. Wind speeds are guessed from treefall geometry. Storm surge lines painted on church walls become coordinates for insurance clerks of the future, if insurance ever resurrects. The tragedy jolts coastal towns into coalition. They conscript amateur radio hobbyists to build foot-powered transmitters. A patchy human mesh network of Morse emerges, chirping meteorological warnings across thousands of kilometers. Each relay station a lighthouse of fists pounding brass keys. 08 psychology of prolonged dark. Sleep cycles lengthen toward the natural 25-hour cadence buried in human genetics. Deprived of digital clocks, communities adopt temporal commons. Any citizen may ring a public bell at dawn's first red hue. The count of strikes since solstice becomes a rolling calendar. Evening storytelling assumes civic duty. Illiteracy is no shame because oral memory merits prestige. Professional remembrancers tour markets reciting lost movies scene by scene to rapt crowds, converting 20th century cinema into Homeric verse. Libraries, previously mausoleums of quiet, surge with voice. The spoken word evolves back into primary storage technology. But darkness also breeds conspiracy. Shadowy cults preach that electricity's death was divine verdict against silicon idolatry. Their sermons carry weight when, on Blackout Day 61, the night sky tangibly brightens. Aurora curtains bloom equatorial. Vermilion and indigo pulses racing overhead. Without sensors, nobody can quantify flux. Yet coronal arcs lick the stratosphere so low that aircraft wrecks glow St. Elmo blue. Panic and euphoria swirl. Some claim it is the sun apologizing. Others say the earth is bleeding charge. 09 first sparks of recovery. Then, the impossible. On the morning of day 78, a copper-shafted water wheel in a village near Lausanne, Switzerland, coupled to a refurbished DC generator, produces a measurable 12 volts across a carbon filament lamp. The bulb flares a brief amber star before popping, but the effect is electrifying in every sense. Within hours, couriers race downhill with word. Electricity can be born again. The message ricochets through Europe, reaching Istanbul in 2 days via a galloping postal chain. Workshops detonate into tinkering fervor. Children strip bicycle dynamos, parents unwind induction stove coils for magnet wire, and grandmothers sacrifice heirloom silverware for solder alloy. Copycat successes multiply. In Quebec, a waterfall that fed a microhydro tourist attraction reignites a single alternating phase. In Kenya, salvaged photovoltaic panels wired directly to DC incandescent bulbs glow faintly at noon. The blackout is not finished, but its absolutism fractures. A new epoch dawns, patchwork power. Yet another divide appears between those who view electric rebirth as a collective commons and those who would monopolize it. Near Bilbao, a consortium of shipping magnates commandeers dockside diesel cranes, loading them with scrap iron for a power toll program. Ports lit by generator light only if fishing villages surrender half their catch. Farther inland, communes erect zipline courier systems across valleys to move perishable goods under minimal friction, refusing generator extortion. 10. The philosophical pivot. As sparks re-enter culture, debates flare over which technologies merit resurrection. Nobody can remake advanced lithography quickly. EUV steppers once built in sterile fabs now lie irreparable. Thus, a technological triage emerges. Vacuum tubes over transistors, Stirling engines over turbofans, analog film over CCD sensors. Young inventors, unburdened by pre-collapse doctrine, mix eras with exuberant disregard. Steam pistons regulate frequency in wind turbines, bioplastic gears mesh with Victorian couplings, and mechanical computers built from Lego bricks perform trigonometric tables for artillery more accurately than human gunners. Historians observe a feedback loop. Energy scarcity enforces localism breeds artisanal knowledge, which pioneers novel energy solutions tuned to microenvironments. Tidal mills in Cornwall, geothermal kettles along Icelandic fissures, kite-borne wind spools in Patagonia. Civilization did not fall back to zero. It ricocheted into a fractal mosaic of tech stacks, each shaped by latitude, climate, and cultural memory. 11. Diplomacy rewired. By Blackout Day 120, the first multi-state summit convenes at neutral ground. The hull of a beached cruise liner in the Bahamas, chosen because its mirrored atrium funnels tropical daylight into boardrooms. Delegates arrive by sail, rowing, and the occasional parafoil glider. The agenda: draft an accord of kilowatts, pledging that any polity achieving grid-scale generation must allocate 5% to a revival network, a planetary backbone for shared science. Signatures are etched into copper sheets with diamond stylus, an archival medium predicted to outlast paper by centuries. 12. Science in exile. Laboratories adapt to constraints elegant in their simplicity. Lacking electron microscopes, biologists invent nanoshadowgraphy, projecting coherent sunlight through tunable pinholes onto reaction chambers coated with photochromic dyes. Resolution reaches the viral scale, reinvigorating vaccine design from scratch. Astronomers, denied CCDs, stack glass photographic plates at varying focal lengths, then overlay them by gaslight to extract parallax, recharting asteroid paths manually. Mathematics flourishes. Chalk is abundant, thought is power-free. A new renaissance in pure theory blooms, precisely because computation is expensive again and abstraction regains aura. 13 echoes of the former world. Every now and then, a relic of the pre-blackout age reawakens like a rogue neuron. In Panama, a container ship's emergency generators coughed to life after engineers realized the blackout had merely fried the control circuitry, not the diesel circuitry itself. They hotwire solenoids with copper spoons, and 80,000 tons of stranded electronics lurches under its own power, a floating archive of televisions and microwave ovens now worth more as copper and rare earth mines than as devices. In the Nevada desert, solar thermal mirrors still track the sun due to gravity-driven clockwork backups. The molten salt they focus remains liquid under its insulated overcoat. When a team of scavengers diverts the heat to a Stirling engine, they achieve the first gigawatt-second of post-collapse continuous power, long enough to smelt aluminum salvaged from de-iced aircraft, birthing the first post-collapse foundry. 14. The human frequency. And always there is music. Absence of earbuds drives people into communal sound. Guitars swell village plazas. African gems echo across Sahel nights. Throat singers and tuva blend harmonics with the hiss of aurora overhead. Ethnomusicologists, liberated from grant deadlines, wander archivally from campfire to campfire, transcribing melodies on parchment. A theory emerges that pulse tempos inch upward with returning electricity, as if human rhythm is entrained by alternating current. The first post-collapse electroacoustic hybrid bands will one day test that premise. 15. Toward Day 3's sunset. By the 72nd hour's close, the blackout has ceased to be an interruption. It is a new timeline's year zero. Children too young to remember touchscreens are now old enough to weave kelp fiber into rope. For them, cloud describes only weather. Yet they inherit starlight unpolluted by LEDs and a sky where satellites, once a mercurial swarm, now trace only silent burns as their orbits decay. Legendary warnings circulate. If humanity chases the old monolithic grids too hungrily, a second darkness might strike. But if it neglects electricity altogether, medicines and telescopes fade. So species and circuitry negotiate anew. The third night ends in a tentative compromise written not on silicon but on the collective retina. Thousands of isolated microlamps glowing across continents, each a covenant that light, like liberty, must be both shared and earned. The 108th hour after the blackout begins as a bruised rose dawn over a planet in cautious experiment with electricity's rebirth. Where patchwork power has taken root, every spark is weighted by ritual, a crank of the village wheel, a whispered blessing against another cosmic silence, then the switch throw heard like a gavel on history itself. Yet most of Earth still turns under the old dark, and somewhere between the lamps and the shadows a new civilization is pressing through its chrysalis. Crucially, no soul can say with certainty why the blackout struck or whether it might return. Theories proliferate like fungi on damp paper, a wandering nullflux pocket in the heliosphere, a quantum resonance between Earth's core and a cosmic ray burst. A deliberate test by an extraterrestrial intelligence curious to see if humans remember how to start fires. Lacking instruments, scholars weigh the competing claims by naked-eye astrophysics and anecdote. They chart the sky's auroral morphology, scratch solar spot tallies on slate, count migratory birds for magnetospheric clues. The pursuit of explanation has become a civic sport that fuses curiosity with fear because any answer that blames human error is almost comforting compared with one that whispers we are playthings of indifferent cosmic weather. The emergent patchwork power age sorts itself into three principal modalities, each with its own mythos and mechanical signature. The river dynasts cluster around watercourses where gravity offers constant torque. From Bhutan to the Basque Country, they hoist wooden penstocks over canyon throats, guiding cataracts into refurbished Pelton wheels cast from scrap artillery shells. Their creed is permanence. Turbines must spin for centuries, so they eschew high RPM for slow, bull-strong rotors and journal bearings greased with rendered tallow. Children grow up learning to listen for harmonic whines that foretell misalignment. Adults hold monthly, desparking ceremonies, dousing lamps to inspect the night sky and remind themselves of fragility. The solar bazaars take root in the equatorial belt. Here the sun is trustworthy, but daily, communities unbolt millions of photovoltaic tiles from defunct corporate rooftops, soldering them into patch quilt canopies above market squares. Daytime is a frenzy of milling and charging. Come twilight, traders auction surplus watt-hours sealed inside saltwater batteries the size of amphorae. Where Roman merchants once weighed olive oil, clerks now weigh lumens. Generators roar only at noon, by stars up they are silent, and the plazas glow with a gentler, copper-throated light that does not outshine the Milky Way. The Ember Republics flourish wherever biomass is dense and cultural memory of steam survives. They feed gasifiers with rice chaff, corn stover, fallen fronds, anything that held chlorophyll, and drive reciprocating engines whose flywheels double as public clocks. Their politics revolve around the rhythm of feedstock, election seasons align with harvests, and tax collectors arrive on wagons smelling of lignin and smoke. Steam engineers command reverence once reserved for software architects. Their notebooks, waterproofed with beeswax, are stored in communal crypts alongside heirloom seeds. The three modalities trade across an increasingly animated planet. Timber caravans from Ember territory barter for copper wire forged by dynasts, while solar artisans engrave photonic etchings, images burned into dye-sublimated cloth by lens-focused sunlight to pay for river iron. Every exchange is mediated by a new unit of value, the kilosecond, equal to exactly 1 million joules of delivered power. Contracts are notarized by timekeepers who start a calibrated chronometer on a generator's first spark and stop it when the buyer's lamp extinguishes. Energy has become both currency and chronicle. But beneath the buzz of generators, an undercurrent of dread persists. The blackout's cause remains unsolved, and pockets of deep silence still swallow entire districts. In the heart of Siberia, explorers discover a dead ring, a circle 200 kilometers wide where compasses spin and even frictional electrostatic charge dissipates instantly. Snowflakes refuse to cling to wool, sparks will not leap across fur. Local Yakut herders whisper that the air feels oiled, as if electrons themselves are being drained by an unseen sink. Samples of soil sent west, couriered by sledge and sail, reveal iron grains magnetized into neatly aligned lattices, a pattern only possible if a titanic pulse of field coherence once locked them in place. The implication is chilling. The blackout may have been the shadow of a geomagnetic sculpture still carving our planet in slow, invisible strokes. Elsewhere, investigators stumble upon survivors of a different silence. A flotilla of cruise ships, thought lost, drifts in the void between Guam and Papua. On deck, passengers gather nightly with acoustic guitars and melted ice bucket drums. Their captain admits they have electricity of a kind, a closed DC loop powered by exercise bikes grid tied to salvaged UPS inverters. Yet they refuse landfall, convinced the mainland is cursed and that remaining under the stars, adrift in an oceanic loop, is the only path to absolution. They have transformed their disaster into pilgrimage, a roving marooned nation lit by the sweat of its citizens. Meanwhile, the curator's grand circuit enters its 5th month. Mounted convoys of archivists, flanked by rough and ready militias, ride a hemispheric route linking the Vatican's secret archives, the Library of Congress, the Bodleian Stacks, Alexandria's new wing, and the underground vault at Mount Kumgang. With solar sextants for navigation and wagon axles carved from aircraft landing gear, they cart crates of acid-free paper, microfiche viewers powered by treadle belts, and hand presses for cold-setting lead type. Each node on the route hosts a fortnightly scribing jubilee where scholars copy by candlelight the rarest texts, still extant, analog prints saved from the digital bonfire. They favor works that teach repeatable processes, fermentation mechanics, alloy recipes, vaccine protocols. Fiction is not spurned, but it travels slowly, stashed between technical reams as ballast of meaning. Midway through the circuit at an abandoned NATO airfield near Thessaloniki, the curators come upon a stopgap wonder, the heliostat theater. Engineers have turned radar dishes into heliostats that track the sun and channel light through a kaleidoscope of mirrors onto a single, ancient carbon arc projector salvaged from a 1930s cinema. Each afternoon, the audience sits in bomb crater bleachers while arcs hiss and roar to life under foot-pumped carbon rods, screening celluloid prints rescued from archives. The silver ghosts of Chaplin and Bergman dance across hangar doors, and for 2 hours the blackout feels almost allegorical, proof that light and story can be conjured by stubborn ingenuity. Simultaneously, in laboratories lit by oil wicks, a coalition of physicists, geologists, and former telecom specialists attempts to decode the blackout's spectral residue. Without oscilloscopes, they devise an analog Fourier table, a massive wooden wheel rimmed with variable-length tuning forks tuned to harmonic intervals of Schumann resonances. They spin the wheel beside a sensitive magnetized reed suspended in vacuum. Each resonance rattles a fork which scratches a soot-coated cylinder. The scratch patterns, studied with magnifying lenses, map the blackout's frequency fingerprint. Results indicate a catastrophic energy injection centered at 7.83 Hz, Earth's baseline resonance, but amplified a millionfold. A global ringing of the ionospheric cavity seems plausible. Yet one datum refuses coherence, a narrow spike at 1,420 MHz, the hydrogen line used by radio astronomers searching for alien beacons. In the final moments before every receiver died, it registered a coherent chirp at that frequency, exactly 0.742 seconds long. The number matches the signal length broadcast by the Arecibo message in 1974, divided by pi. Proof or coincidence? The blackboard chalk breaks under the weight of speculation. Governance must evolve, and as the third post-blackout season looms, Earth's scattered powers meet the challenge with wildly divergent philosophies. In the Iberian cantons, democracy is auctioned daily. Citizens sell their vote for a day's worth of kiloseconds, delivered via lantern tokens. The tokens burn a calibrated length of time, so bribery is self-limiting. One can purchase only as much influence as one can personally illuminate. Across what was once the United States, the grid compact emerges. Any township that brings a generator online must send apprentices to 3 other towns before connecting itself, forcing knowledge diffusion at the speed of goodwill. Violators risk having their transformer cores confiscated and melted down for common inventory. Conversely, the 0-point regnum, a theocratic enclave straddling former oil emirates, decrees electricity a planetary sin. They levy photon tithes, seizing copper and optical glass to suppress electric revival, wielding the blackout narrative as proof of divine displeasure. Smugglers running dynamo parts through their deserts hide capacitors inside dates and transformer laminations inside prayer rugs, reenacting the ancient tradecraft of contraband scripture. As humanity reorganizes, biology executes its own quiet counterascent. Cities, stripped of HVAC hum, become megaphone canyons for bird calls. Peregrine falcons, once deterred by sodium glare, reclaim skyscraper ledges. Bats repopulate overpasses freed from ultrasound chatter of parking sensors. Insects, no longer lured to death by streetlights, return in heavier clouds, rebalancing pollination cycles. Farmers record a 15% bump in yields where night dark is deepest until locust swarms, likewise emboldened, level the gains in explosive plagues. Chaos and fecundity play seesaw on a planet learning to exhale. It is then, at the rough midpoint between catastrophe and renaissance, that the fourth branch of possibility flickers into view: selective re-elimination. Technologists argue that instead of striving to reboot the monolithic grids, societies should overlay a smart, nimble, low-frequency mesh, one that pulses current in sync with the planet's natural resonances, thereby appeasing or avoiding whatever cosmic factor tripped the first darkness. They propose Schumann synchronous grids, wiring regions so that their phase aligns with local cavity modes. If the cosmic jury does indeed punish deviation, staying in tune might grant immunity. Skeptics frame it as technostic folklore, idealists call it the only marriage of physics and humility that might avert a second crash. Pilot projects sprout. In the Patagonian steppe, a Kyborn wind array feeds a 7.83 Hz inverter, lighting earthen huts with a heartbeat glow that pulses like distant thunder. Residents say the rhythmic light calms livestock and masks human activity from predators, 2 bonuses nobody predicted. Reports float northward of wolves less inclined to encroach, of fewer sudden cardiac deaths among elders, placebo or resonance. The debate bolsters funding in kiloseconds and in faith. Meanwhile, the node monks score their first bona fide miracle. On blackout day 307, a monastery in the Swiss Alps cold boots a hardened laptop wired through a labyrinth of surge arresters and achieves a handshake with another node in Yakutia. Not on the old internet, its infrastructure is beyond skeletal but across a hand-built narrowband spectrum hopping at 3 kHz. The device updates its clock, logs a block header, block number 0, a new genesis for a new world. The significance detonates across techie circles, a blockchain reborn in low power, proof of work replaced by proof of mechanical effort, crank-based hashing. Data becomes a sacrament. To add a block, one must literally sweat. This shift in digital philosophy ripples outward. Academic journals, previously starved of peer review, adopt the crankchain to timestamp findings. Thus a bacteriologist's discovery in Kerala and a metallurgist's alloy recipe in Leeds can be cross-validated weeks later when their blocks meet en route. Citations revert to etchings in copper leaf, but the integrity of scholarship ascends again, anchored by kinetic honesty. All the while, the sun marches through its solar maximum. Astronomers, now attuned to cosmic mood swings, note that spots cluster in patterns reminiscent of cardiac fibrillation, the star's own arrhythmia mirrored in humanity's. They cannot measure flux properly, yet spectral shadows hint at a new hyperactive cycle. The planet girds itself. Dynamos are disconnected at local noon to evade potential CME surges. Lanterns doused at midnight to celebrate each hour. Electricity remains a choice rather than a casualty. The psychological pivot completes. Power is privilege, not entitlement, and humility toward the heavens migrates from theology to policy. Then quilts of coincidence sow a turning point. A geothermal vent beneath the collapsed turbine hall of Iceland's Helishii plant resumes measurable steam pressure. Sensors wired to a hand-built seismometer register the tremor. Within days, a multinational engineering corps descends on the site. They lop cables burned to ash, rebuild relay logic with stepping switches cannibalized from defunct phone exchanges, and gradually coax one of the original turbines into synchronous rotation, not at 60 Hz but at 7.83 Hz. The turbine hums a low, almost subaudible drone that vibrates tectonic plates more than eardrums. And yet, miracle or margin of coincidence, the generator output is stable, clean, and surging past a megawatt. For the first time since the blackout, a power plant produces continuous, high-grade energy. News spreads like capillary action through parchment networks. Dynasts, bazaars, and republics dispatch delegates to observe. Some arrive skeptical, others kneel at the humming stator like pilgrims at a relic. Over a fortnight of tests, the output never falters even during a minor solar flare that sets old satellites tumbling like dying moths. The Schumann hypothesis gains weight. Perhaps harmony with planet and star is the necessary rubric for electrical safety in the new age. A conclave forms dubbed the Harmonic Apprenticeship to codify this emergent discipline. Their charter merges engineering, seismology, ethnography to integrate indigenous land wisdom and cosmology. They plan a global lattice of subaudible stations, each tuned to a local resonance node, weaving a tapestry of power that breathes with Earth rather than suffocating it. Some call it utopian, others say it is merely the next logical iteration after overreach shattered the old grid. Culturally, a renaissance flickers alive. Theaters incorporate mechanical zoetropes driven by foot treadles, painters grind pigments at daybreak using mortar sets wreathed in dynast light, poets hold hourglass slams where each verse must finish before sand drains and lantern oil runs out. Weddings time their vows to dawn pulses from local generators, symbolizing concord with cosmic cadence. Festivals of darkness commemorate the original 3-day void each equinox. All lamps are voluntarily extinguished and citizens share stories of the first silence so that children remember both terror and triumph. But the planet's wounds are not healed. Satellite carcasses rain down unchecked, dropping tantalizing troves of gallium arsenide panels and toxic hydrazine tanks into forests and seas. Microplastics surge anew in river deltas where water treatment is still renascent. And the dead ring in Siberia widens by a kilometer each moon, according to charcoal stakes hammered by geodesists. Whatever force stitched that null zone is alive, and its expansion writes a counter-narrative in the margins of hope. Military doctrines adapt. Instead of nuclear deterrence, launch mechanisms useless without precision electronics, nations invest in field burners, directional EMP mortars tuned to scramble enemy dynamos. Their existence drives diplomatic urgency. The Bahamas Accord expands into the Pact of Pulses, banning weapons that weaponize silence. Enforcement is communal. Signatories agree to douse all electricity for 1 hour on the solstice, a planetary lights out during which sensors listen for unauthorized transmissions. Compliance becomes a global vigil, part prayer, part police. On the domestic front, human relationships recalibrate. Court recorders note a spike in marriages formed across class lines. Energy scarcity melts social stratifications quicker than revolutions ever did. Likewise, mental health healers document drops in digital overstimulation disorders, yet anxiety about cosmic recurrence fills the vacuum. They coin luminal trauma, the persistent dread of sudden darkness when a lamp flickers or a generator coughs. Treatment involves communal night walks and training in manual firemaking, reaffirming agency against the void. Education transforms. Schools operate outdoors, chalkboards slung between tree trunks so eyes adapt to natural lux, and lessons weave together physics with agriculture. Children alternate weeks in bright class, where they learn to harness and maintain generators, and dark class, where they master life without them. The motto etched above countless schoolyard archways reads, "Bask in the spark, but learn from the dark." As the calendar tilts toward the second anniversary of the blackout, planet-wide intrigue crescendos around an unfolding celestial drama. Astronomers have tracked a dense swarm of interstellar dust now crossing Earth's orbit, a debris plume that may have triggered the original event by focusing cosmic rays through gravitational lensing. Predictions claim the tail end of the plume will pass by in roughly 6 months. If the theory holds, Earth enters a window of relative electromagnetic calm, the first since the blackout. Preparations for grid resurgence trials ramp up at fever pitch. Spare transformers are rewound with laminated linseed-insulated iron, gas turbines refurbished with ceramic bearings to withstand resonance phasing. Superconductor cables braided from magnesium diboride immune to sudden quench. Yet another faction emerges, the Keepers of Silence, dissidents who argue that reigniting the old load curves is hubris. They sabotage test sites, slice earthing straps, and circulate broadsheets quoting myths where mankind was twice punished for sundering night from day. The dialectic gets literal. Columns of inky posters appear beside bright copper proclamation sheets, darkness versus light in public ink duel. Town criers moderate debates by hourglass, whichever side empties its arguments first must yield the plaza for a day. Amid that tension, something exquisitely unexpected happens. A team of marine biologists studying deep-sea vents off Easter Island uses a clockwork submersible powered by iron oxide batteries regenerated by hydrothermal gradients. 12 kilometers down, cameras capture an octopus species with iridescent skin patterns matching Schumann harmonics pulsing topside. The creature's chromatophores flash exactly 7.83 times per second, synchronized to inaudible rhythms propagating through mantle rock. For scientists, the revelation is paradigm-shattering. Biological life deep beneath the blackout's reach may have always danced to those frequencies, long before humans wired copper into walls. Suddenly, the Schumann synchronous movement feels less like adaptation and more like reunion with an ancient planetary beat. Thus, the third chapter of the blackout's tale closes upon a tremor of anticipation caught between the expanding dead ring and the harmonic dawn, between ambitions of grand grid resurgence and vows of temperate light. Between cosmic menace and cephalopod lullabies in unfathomed dark. Humanity stands poised to decide whether it will plug once more into its colossal lightning on demand or settle permanently for a symphony of smaller, earth-tuned fires. The 2-year anniversary of the Great Silence looms like a solar eclipse everyone can feel but no one can see. Across every latitude, humanity rushes to finish whatever destiny it has chosen. Some polish rotor shafts for the largest Schumann synchronous generator array ever attempted. Others grind axe heads to defend the dark. The calendar is heavy with portents. Astronomers plot the waning edge of the interstellar dust plume on star maps painted over the ceiling of an old observatory in Cordoba. Economists, their discipline now a fusion of thermodynamics and anthropology, pin crude thread graphs across corkboards to guess which regions can survive another systemic shock. Poets are busiest of all, because everyone wants words to recite if tomorrow empties the sky again. 01 The window of calm. Measurements taken from ad hoc ionoson balloons, canvas envelopes warmed by wood gas burners, confirm what the sky watchers hoped. The ionosphere's electric potential has settled into its quietest state since the blackout. That calm, expected to last 83 days, is christened the window. For many, it is a trial period granted by the cosmos itself, one chance to prove that electricity can coexist with humility. Governments issue decrees written in both ink and wattage budgets. Any grid experiment must cap frequency at or below local Schumann peaks, must island itself behind mechanical fuses that shear under anomalous harmonic spikes, and must keep nightly dark intervals for environmental recovery. Breach the rules, and the Pact of Pulses authorizes neighboring polities to cut your lines with cold chisels. Even the Keepers of Silence concede a truce, provided their emissaries may observe every test. They arrive cloaked in indigo linen that swallows lantern light, faces marked by ash sigils representing the 3-day void. Where they walk, conversation lowers to a hush somewhere between reverence and resentment. 02 The Great Synchronization. Day 1 of the window dawns windless in Iceland, where the Helishii harmonic plant stands ready. Its control room is a cathedral of repurposed technologies. Brass pendulums track microvariations, Bakelite switches clack like metronomes, and a vast circular slide rule, 6 meters across, mounted horizontally, lets operators calculate load versus resonance in real time. At local noon, they receive semaphore confirmation from Patagonia and Bhutan that their satellite prototype stations are phase-locked at 7.83 Hz. The order is given to raise output. Rotor speed increases with a sound midway between throat song and thunder. Copper wound alternators sweat ozone. Gauges carved from volcanic glass climb one breath at a time. When the megawatt mark passes, 3 observers faint. 2 from jubilation, 1 from fear. A messenger hawk is released carrying a ribbon that changes color in sunlight to signal success to watchers along the Atlantic littoral. Cheers ripple eastward faster than any crank chain packet could travel. By dusk, bonfires blossom on European headlands like incandescent semaphore. Yet the synchronization is only half the gamble. For harmony to hold, the generators on 3 continents must share power across the ether, not through wires. Radio engineers, hunched in a stone keep near Mont Saint-Michel, trigger their crowning invention, the long drum. It is a grounded vertical antenna 200 meters high, wound with a copper helix and tuned by a water-filled moat that rises and falls against a stepped retaining wall to tweak inductance. When activated, it couples the Helishii output into the Earth ionosphere cavity itself, turning the planet into a colossal transmission line. In theory, any receiver spec'd for the fundamental can sip power out of ground stakes the way telegraph sounders once drank current from single-wire circuits. Moments later, halfway around the world, a kelp farmer on the Chilean coast touches 2 copper plates sunk into tide pools and sees a test lamp flicker alive. She weeps so long her neighbors think she is injured. Energy, once captured by monopolies of metal and bureaucracy, has slipped the leash. For believers, it is proof of cosmic reconciliation. For skeptics, the prelude to a second, deeper catastrophe whose scale no slide rule can catch. 0-3 counterforces. Resistance swells immediately. On the 9th night of the window, the Keepers of Silence sabotage the long drum moat, opening sluices so seawater floods the cavity, detuning the antenna and knocking peripheral receivers offline. They leave chalk scrawl on the tower base. Silence was mercy. Hours later, a River Dynast militia surrounds the site, but the saboteurs have vanished into moon-paled salt marsh. Retaliation feels tempting. Cut their lantern allotments, seize their copper, but Helishii's council votes restraint. If power justifies punishment, says chair engineer Clara Magnusdottir, then we have learned nothing. Instead, they recalibrate the drum, this time coaching remote users how to phase track locally, so a single choke point can never again dim the grid's new constellations. Autonomy, not reach, becomes strategy. Elsewhere, the sabotage encourages Echo X. Ember Republic partisans rail that ground current transmission is a Trojan horse for foreign influence. They torch a solar bazaar depot storing rectifiers. Bazaar merchants retaliate by embargoing saltwater batteries, and food prices spike along Republic borders. A lesser-known clause of the Pact of Pulses triggers. If economic warfare threatens essential supply, neutral third parties may intervene. Copper League telegraph stations buzz with arbitration notices. The world, it seems, has remembered how to slide from cooperation to contest faster than electrons can relocate. 04 when dust shifts wind. Midway through the window, the dust plume begins clearing sooner than predicted. Astronomers at Cordoba chalk a grim parabola. Earth will exit the veil 3 weeks ahead of schedule, presenting its dayside cheek to full galactic cosmic flux again. The news ignites conference bonfires from Lahore to Lagos. Grid optimists argue for accelerated rollout. Light everything while the sky is lenient. Keepers preach immediate blackout to prove humility. A compromise surfaces. The wave test, a deliberate, global power pulse scale to match Schumann amplitude, but modulated in a Fibonacci sequence so any echo in magnetosphere data will reveal constructive or destructive interference patterns. One single 12-minute window, 3 alternations of brightness and dark, with every generator above 10 kilowatts participating. Preparations border on choreography. Heliograph towers signal remote hamlets. Crankchain consensus stores the timing parameters immutably on their mechanical blockchain. Children practice countdown chants. For once, the entire planet rehearses the same heartbeat. 05 the wave test. At 0 hour, trillions of joules surge into ground loops. Cities of patchwork lamps bloom and extinguish according to the golden ratio. From orbit, where half-dead satellites still tumble with open-camera shutters, the pattern supposedly resembles a spiral galaxy clasped to the planet's surface. 12 minutes later, the last lamps wink dark, and a hush unrolls dense enough to muffle owl calls. Then instruments go mad. Magnetometers hand-notched on smoked glass scratch S-curves too steep to match any known storm. In the dead ring, sensors hammered into permafrost record the first uptick in residual charge since discovery. But most striking is the sky. Auroras ignite, yes, but instead of ragged curtains they align into concentric circles centered roughly on the coordinates of Heliotii. Colors climb down the spectrum, red to green to violet, ending on a shade so deep it seems to swallow starlight. For 21 seconds, every radio still functional emits a single pure tone at precisely 1,420 megahertz, the hydrogen line of the cosmos. Then silence returns, darker than before. Around the world, every listening ear imagines the same fear. We just rang a bell no one knows the size of. 06 first losses, first lessons. 30 hours post-wave, anomalies erupt. A biomass generator in Borneo overfluxes and melts windings. For tree villages plunge back into darkness. A Swiss alpine battery bank refuses to hold charge, as though electrons drip out through corks that were watertight yesterday. Yet in Patagonia, the kite array registers a 4% improvement in torque for reasons unknown. In Nairobi, a Schumann-tuned clinic lamp glows brighter at half-measured input. Early data point to interference nodes, places where ground current and sky current either quarrel or harmonize. The new grid is a weather system now. Operators must become forecasters. A coalition, half engineer, half shaman, proposes vigil forges, regional workshops equipped to pour quick replacement rotors, fabricate adjustable inductors, and train frequency shepherds skilled at sensing harmonic eddies by ear. Forges open in derelict shopping malls, in ruins of sports arenas, in cathedral crypts once hushed. Any cavernous shell with walls enough to house looms of copper and stacks of basalt dampers. Apprentices sleep among the coils to memorize the low thrums of stable operation. 07 The dead ring stirs. Perhaps most unsettling, geodesists in Siberia report that the dead ring's expansion halts 3 days after the wave test. Not only halts, it contracts by several meters. Soil samples crackle with residual magnetism that now dissipates normally instead of screaming off into emptiness. Team leader Nadezhda Kinnak publishes, on copper leaf archived to the crankchain, the hypothesis that the synchronized pulse nulled whatever standing wave had leached charge into subsoil lattices. The ring, she claims, may have been a cosmic echo chamber, and the wave test retuned its walls. Her conclusion galvanizes policy. Suddenly, the keepers of silence divide. A minority concede that harmonic grids might be corrective rather than blasphemous. Schisms fracture their monasteries. Debates once whispered in cellars spill into public quadrangles. Some abbots shatter their own ash sigils, stepping into lantern light for the first time since the blackout. 08 Dust curtain fall. On day 62 of the window, dust metrics confirm Earth has fully emerged from the plume. All prior serenity is gone. Cosmic ray counts climb. Minor CME alerts multiply. The pact had stipulated a rollback to lower loads, yet success, the stable ring, the bright clinic lamps, tempts more expansion. The Bahamas Pact convenes a crisis congress, again aboard the rusted cruise liner now anchored as a neutral parliament vessel. Delegates board by sail and solar-powered hydrofoils. Their opening session is interrupted when the forward mast cracks. Dry rot never fixed. A metaphor no one misses. Arguments rage for 36 straight hours. River dynasts insist the planet proved it can stomach tuned grids. Ember republics argue the wave was luck. Next time, the cosmic drum might shatter eardrums. Solar bazaars occupy a pragmatic middle. Keep load growth but impose a universal dark dividend. 10 minutes of blackout every hour. A planetary sinusoidal rhythm that forces constant humility. The compromise, later dubbed the breath protocol, passes by a margin of 1 vote and 3 abstentions. Implementation is immediate. Every generator must install mechanical flyknife interrupters timed by gravity pendulums. The world's lights now blink in global unison. A slow inhale-exhale of luminance. Children name the bright phase Dayheart and the dark phase Nightbreath, embedding engineering in language older than textbooks. 09 children of both lights. The protocol yields unforeseen side benefits. Agriculturalists discover photosynthesis efficiency rises under pulsed illumination. Stomata seem to close less, conserving water. Urban ecologists note migratory birds navigate more accurately with routine dark windows, reducing collisions with glazed facades. Human health metrics spike. The regular microdark resets circadian signals, easing insomnia that had shadowed generator towns. Cultural expression blossoms too. Musicians sync performances to the breath cycle, weaving silence as rhythm. Architects design pulse temples, whose stained glass motifs only align when lamps blink, projecting ephemeral murals on cobblestones. Lovers time vows so the final kiss lands at the cusp of night breath, a gamified romance that becomes folklore by month's end. 10 The silence returns and passes. 74 days after the window opened, during a minor geomagnetic squall, instruments detect a power sag across the meshed grid. For 10 terrifying minutes nothing flows. The world's pulse stops. This many fear is the second judgment. People hold their breath literally. When the lamps flare alive again on schedule, night breath, then Dayheart. Cheers erupt from rooftops 3 continents away. The SAG was a breaker event. The breath protocol's mechanical interrupters sacrifice themselves rather than force the ionosphere. Psychologically, that single safe shutdown finishes what the synchronization started. Humanity now trusts its rhythms. Not naively, vigil forges keep molten copper warm, but confidence seeps into marrow. The blackout joins the lexicon of catastrophes survived, like ice ages and plagues. Parents tell bedtime stories of laptop ghosts and skyfire, but children raised in breath-blinked villages consider them cautionary myths rather than lived horror. 11 letters to the future. With stability comes retrospection. Curators propose a project grander than any library tour. The Light Codex, a compendium of everything humanity has relearned or reframed since the blackout. It will be written in triplicate media, etched nickel discs, lignin-free vellum, and sequences of colored glass beads readable by optical cipher, stored in chambers cut high above sea level and far from tectonic rifts. Its most radical feature: every entry includes a margin note on how to derive the knowledge from first principles in the dark. No algorithm without a hand tool equivalent, no vaccine formula without a fermentation analog, no poem without oral cadence marks. The work begins beneath the limestone arches of the Chartres Cathedral crypt. Steeple bells ring hourglass changes. Scribes in flax aprons annotate diagrams by Schumann-tuned lamp glow. The Codex's first volume ends with a blank page, reserved for whatever explanation of the blackout future scholars settle upon. Leaving it empty is no oversight but a pledge that humility will remain in perpetuity. 12 Toward the 5th season. Agronomists now mark the calendar differently. Beyond winter, spring, summer, fall, they add the Phos season. The 80-day window predicted to recur each orbital pass through the dust stream's trailing arm. During Phos, heavy grid experiments are allowed. Outside it, only breath protocol loads. This institutionalizes caution and hope in equal parts. Trade caravans orient their cycles so high-energy tasks, glass firing, metal forging, high-pressure bioreactors peak in Phos. The rest of the year belongs to maintenance, reflection, and, increasingly, exploration. Because a restless itch remains. The hydrogen chirp at 1,420 megahertz that accompanied the wave test haunts minds like half-remembered music. Did humanity knock and someone knock back? A new generation of radio astronomers, using purely passive, receiver-only arrays to appease keepers, crafted from wagon wheel spirals of aluminum foil, listen during every night breath. So far, the sky stays mum. The silence they now nurture by policy becomes an instrument. Absence of chirp is data, too. 13 Legacy and Lullaby. 5 years after the blackout, a festival inaugurates the first fully harmonized intercontinental grid segment. Patagonia to Iceland to Bhutan in one loop. Lanterns along that meridian glow a subtle lavender, a dye mixture keyed to the grid's frequency, so any drift tints them red or blue. A public meter for planetary health. Children ride wooden scooters under lavender arcs singing call and response rounds that mimic the breath protocol. Light is lone, dark is dew. They chant in dozens of accents. Share the spark, and night shares you. At midnight, as protocol dictates, the lamps inhale to dark. For half a minute, only starlight reigns. The Milky Way tents the planet with silent fire. Somewhere, octopuses in the benthic gloom pulse chromatophores in sync, proving unseen kinship. When Dayheart returns, it does not seem to conquer the dark, but to rise out of it. Like melody from lullaby. The story that began with a perfect planetary null ends not with triumphant floodlights or with eternal hush, but with a breath, an alternating current of restraint and daring, science and myth, electron and echo. Humanity keeps its night light small, its curiosity mammoth, and its humility tuned to the quiet drum of a living world.